Cosmos, but also for the whole crypto space in general. I think it can be very exciting. Before we dive into it, maybe, quick round of like introductions. I mean, some of you don't need like big introductions, maybe just like what are you working on in the DeFi space right now in like a very short intro. Yeah.
Hey guys, my name is Sunny. I gave a talk yesterday. I'm one of the co-founders of Osmosis. With Osmosis on the DeFi side, we're working on making the best spot order book in all of crypto.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Charles from the dYdX Foundation. The dYdX Foundation and the dYdX ecosystem is working on growing the dYdX ecosystem. We are very excited about the launch in the coming weeks of dYdX Unlimited, which brings systematic liquidity for long-tail asset permissionless listings, as well as plenty of other infrastructure upgrade for the good of perps trading. So if you have any projects coming up, think of getting listed on dYdX. It's free of charge, and liquidity will be generated by the mega vault of dYdX.
Hi everyone, my name is George. I'm the founder of Euclid protocol. We're building a unified liquidity layer that allows you to tap into any source of liquidity that exists on 50+ networks across Cosmos, EVM, and Solana. And into a unified source of truth to be able to swap for the lowest slippage in 3 to 4 seconds cross-chain without the need to bridge your assets from the chain that they already exist on.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Zion. I'm the CMO at Neutron. So Neutron's building a very tightly integrated DeFi ecosystem with protocols like Drop, which is a liquid staking protocol backed by Lido, as well as Mars, which is a pretty powerful credit protocol built on Neutron and others like that.
Awesome, perfect. So when I saw the title, like Make DeFi Great Again, I was thinking like, actually DeFi is pretty great already. The DeFi a lot, but mostly on Ethereum actually, to leverage and like lending protocols and so on. But it feels like there's not really like a big DeFi ecosystem right now in Cosmos. So maybe we can start with you, Zion. Like, what do you think about? Is DeFi already great? And like, what about like Cosmos ecosystem DeFi and Ethereum DeFi? Is it great already, but not on Cosmos? Or what do you think about that?
Yeah, so I think there are definitely some elements of DeFi that are already great. I think we still have a long way to go, though. I like Matt Levine, who's a finance blogger, his definition of a good financial system being one that creates and distributes abundance in life. I think there's a lot of earnest builders in the space that want to build products and services that ultimately enhance people's quality of life in some way. I think in DeFi, there's still a lot of room to grow in that respect. I think, in terms of like what can, ultimately get us to return and ultimately surpass the level of like success and excitement that we saw around like DeFi summer, will be, that'll kind of come through like a confluence of both political and product factors. So like on the political side of things, I think we ultimately need to see some clarity around like what constitutes a security, and also like what is the path to registering a security, if that's like the route that like a founding team wants to go with. Because obviously like crypto's a global industry, but ultimately we've seen the adverse effect of like Gary Gensler and the SEC sort of like regulating through enforcement action, like carpet bombing the industry with like a plethora of lawsuits and like what that's done. And so I think like it's not anything one company can sort of do, like that political side of things, but I think as an industry we need to sort of lobby for like progressive regulation that actually pushes the industry forward. Because like anecdotally, I've talked to a lot of like DeFi founders that would be interested in launching a DeFi product if it wasn't for the fact that like there's really no clarity around like how they will go about doing that if they launch a token. And like if a lawsuit comes from the SEC, it's effectively like a death sentence for them, because startups already have like enough to worry about when it comes to like things trying to kill them. And so like, a lawsuit from the SEC is sort of just another sort of thing that's like trying to guarantee your demise. So I think that's one factor. And then I think on the product side of things, I think we just need to sort of ruthlessly focus on building great DeFi products. There's a lot of different factors that kind of go into that we've been focusing on at Neutron. One of those things is like accessibility. I think we've made some strides in this regard with, like wallet UX since DeFi summer, but I think there's still a lot of room to grow there. Synergy as well. So like, I think Apple's kind of like the canonical example of this. Like you own an iPhone, you own a Mac well together, they work seamlessly. it's so much different than if you own like an Android phone and you own a Mac. So I think like building DeFi products that work well with other existing products and services you already use is important. And then I also think like building product experiences that are fun is pretty underrated. So, you know, in DeFi, so I was listening to like a podcast recently with some of the founders of Cursor AI, which is an AI code editing tool that allows you to basically, it provides suggestions of like new code blocks that you may suggest. It can write like whole programs as well, but like it'll provide you like suggestions of like new code blocks that you can just basically press tab on your computer and accept. And like that's in the context of that, like fast is fun, right? Because like the faster that you can code, the more fun it is, because you're using AI to basically effectively produce, you know, more output in a much shorter amount of time. But in some cases, like you want the experience to last longer, the product experience to last longer, and that's more fun. So like fun is contextual as well, but I think focusing on building like fun product experiences is really underrated. Things that like delight the user. So yeah, I think it's like a confluence of political and product factors that's gonna help us return and ultimately surpass like the previous level of success and excitement that we saw around DeFi summer.
Awesome. So I think there are 2 points, right? You mentioned regulation and security is like a big bottleneck for DeFi, and the second one is like the UX. Maybe let's start with the first one, regulation and security. Do you guys all agree this is a huge bottleneck for DeFi right now, or like one of the most important ones?
I think it's an important one, but I think we should also think as an industry how we want to distribute our own products. And we tend to kind of design some silos in our mind between the DeFi users and the CeFi users. And it's very easy for us to kind of keep looking at the same subset of users, which are the DeFi users, and trying to kind of poach some users from Ethereum or poach some users from Solana and bring them to Cosmos and vice versa. But eventually, there is a low-hanging fruit for all of us, I believe, to essentially bring DeFi where the users are. And when people ask us, who are your biggest competitors, I will very seldomly mention DeFi players, because I think our biggest competitors are CeFi. This is where the next subset of users, like not the early adopters, but like the mid-curve adopters are. And if you look at the perps market, for example, there is 95% of perps which are trading on CeFi and only 5% on chain. So I think it's important for us to essentially bring DeFi where the users are, rather than to keep spending energy, money, and effort in general to bring people to your own .com or .app or .something. So bringing the front ends and kind of bring into your framework things users will not really change, and we need to adapt to that. And if you really want to 10x, 50x, 100x your protocol, you need to think how you're going to do distribution. If you and me are launching a new t-shirt brand tomorrow and we open a shop in Dubai, we can run a few math, and we're going to eventually learn that there is only so much traffic in front of your shop every day. But if we decide to put our t-shirts on Costco shelves, on Amazon.com, and bring the product where the users are, suddenly your growth is really exponential. So I think there is a lot of thoughts to be put on how you distribute and how you essentially adapt to what the people want. And if they want to be within a wallet and they want to be partially on CeFi, partially on DeFi, it's a decision you can take to say, okay, I'm going to be pragmatic, I'm going to bring my product to you guys and just essentially onboard much more CeFi players. There is right now for many of the CeFi players some kind of challenge. Many of them are acquiring licenses globally. So think of the Binance, the OKX of the world. They get licensed in Dubai, they get licensed in Europe, and most of those licenses are for spot only. So what it means is that if you're doing lending or if you're doing futures, if you look at the map of users globally, every time there is a new license, there is new potential users for DeFi, because this license means you can only do spot now and you have to close your position on futures. So it's a great opportunity for us to say, okay, let's bring our product to those guys because they really have a need right now. As a Dubai citizen or the French citizens or whatever other countries, they're bidding like they got one toy removed from the sandbox, so to say, and they will try to find somewhere else. So we have to be where this problem happened and bring a simple solution.
All right, but do you think like the CeFi players have then a regulatory, or like they have an advantage because they can be like, adhere to the regulations and so on, and a DeFi protocol is more decentralized, so there's also challenges for adoption, right, and being legitimized in a country?
they do have an advantage, but with these licenses they get, which are mostly spot licenses, they also get like suddenly a part of their business going away, right? So it's important to consider that the operators of DeFi might be like pure operators of DeFi coming from Osmosis, dYdX, and many others, but also some people which will be hybrid. The same way your bank today, if you're banking with HSBC or Citibank or anyone, their core business is your saving account, but they also kind of bring to you car insurance. They bring to you access to the stock market. So they become kind of aggregators for financial products. And I think probably the same patterns of distribution will happen also for the new wave of digital finance or crypto finance, however you want to call it. And that's important to, again, think about distribution. If you really want to expand the amount of potential users you can add to your application.
Yeah. How do you see it, Sunny, for Osmosis, basically? Like, are you like more looking to integrate in like CeFi systems, or like is it actually competing with CeFi systems? And yeah, what do you think about the regulatory aspect and differences?
Yeah, I think for Osmosis specifically, I think it is, a competing liquidity venue to centralized exchanges, making it more permissionless open access. And I think the benefit, I mentioned this on yesterday as well, but I think the reason DeFi has like value is like, you have a larger tail end of assets, right? That usually can't be listed on centralized exchanges, or centralized exchanges are just slow to list. But on DeFi, you have permissionless listing, so you get new things are traded. Josh, founder of Kepler, he always says like the best opportunities are on chain. And so it's like, if you wanted UU or GOAT or something, whatever, right? It's like, it's all on chain. This stuff's not listed on centralized exchanges. Now but on Polaris, we're actually going to do something interesting where, I talked yesterday about how we're going to tap into like, aggregating over all of the DeFi liquidity, right? But our plans is the next step is we'll actually allow people to take their existing exchange API keys. So if you have a Binance account or a Coinbase account, input those into your Polaris, account, and then we'll actually route over those as well. So if you're getting better, execution by going through Binance liquidity or something, we'll take it. Our goal is just to get users from the assets they want to what they want in one unified interface. And if that means routing through SEX liquidity, that's fine.
Yeah, awesome. And that also brings us to the point, like thinking about for the whole DeFi ecosystem, like most of it is like great technology, obviously. And then I think what's really important is like the UX aspect. How do we bring it all together in a user-facing dashboard? It poses the question also like for the Cosmos ecosystem, is it even important to have DeFi on Cosmos kind of, or is it like totally irrelevant and we shouldn't even think about it? We should more think about how do we build the technology and integrate it in a chain abstracted front end, basically.
I think that's a good point. There is one DeFi in my opinion, and if you look at how the ecosystem within Cosmos has evolved over the past years, you realize that more and more projects are actually building bridges via Price Oracle or via proper bridges with other ecosystems, right? So when you say DeFi and Cosmos could be doing better, I think it's doing great already. At least at dYdX, we're very happy with the move we did on the Cosmos stack. We registered $225 billion of trading volumes over the past 12 months. So definitely there is a good adoption over there. But as many others, we are also building bridges via Oracle. So whatever you can trade on Solana is also tradable on dYdX. You can trade also some permission markets from Polymarket on dYdX. And we're not the only one to do that, right? So I think eventually, fast forward, give it 6 to 12 months, you will see like there is one DeFi market. And some people will enable different technologies to eventually totally abstract these silos, which have been built by different stacks, and the users will be just finding either best liquidity, best execution, or great ideas. But I think it's our role also to mitigate this complexity of the stack. There is only so many people with an appetite for bridging and changing and buying gas fees here and there. So again, trying to really bring the right product to the right people. And I believe that the next big wave of DeFi users are actually just before our eyes within CeFi.
Yeah.
Like, just to add on to that, I think that like to build the best DeFi apps, I think you do need a like integrated app chain stack, right? And so, you know, the way dYdX, for example, has like built-in oracles into the validator network, having validators run order books in the mempool. Alpin, one of my colleagues, will be giving a talk right after this on how to improve that even further. You know, doing stuff like application-aware ordering, right? So I think there's a lot of, if you want to do any sort of, you know, build a really high performance, like fair DeFi system, you kind of need to do it on an app chain. And I think the Cosmos stack is like the best stack that exists for building actually decentralized app chains.
Yeah. So you think Cosmos stack, Cosmos chains are basically the way how to get to like chain abstraction and like, yeah, breaking the liquidity fragmentation across all the different ecosystems, including like Ethereum, Solana, Cosmos, and so on. And Cosmos is the technology that makes it happen in a way.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, like, I guess what I meant more is like Cosmos SDK and Comet BFT is like the stack that lets you build integrated decentralized applications, right? So, you know, stuff like dYdX, stuff like Thorchain, like Osmosis, like, you know, Hyperliquid is, you know, was built on Comet BFT, and like, so all, you know, to build all of these like things, you need to have a decentralized protocol, and like, you know, you see things like Unichain and stuff like, but with these like single sequencers, the regulatory issues, right, which you don't get when you actually have a proper decentralized system. You know, it's funny that like I feel like Unichain is like, dYdX started as like you know, a contract on Ethereum, then went to an L2, but then they realized at the end, like, you know, you need a decentralized app chain. I feel like, you know, Uniswap is like still like one cycle behind.
And do you think Unichain will swap to become a Cosmos chain at some point then?
I think they'll find some way they have to decentralize their sequencer stack.
Right.
I think the best decentralized sequencer stack is Comet BFT based.
Right, yeah. I mean, I think it's very interesting because also Starknet, they're also building their decentralized sequencer set now, and it's like almost the same thing, like building an app chain on Ethereum, like a L2 is pretty much similar to building an app chain on Cosmos now. Is that like not an issue, like that basically the two ecosystems become more and more like have the same vision, or like you think Cosmos will prevail there as a technology because it's superior? Then,
I mean, I guess this goes down to the question of like, what is Cosmos, right? Is it the specific, you know, Cosmos SDK tech stack that we're trying to have win, or is it these ideas that we had of app chains and like fast finality based blockchains? And, you know, if more and more things are just becoming Cosmos, that's great.
yeah, yeah.
I think, you know, Cosmos is, you know, hasn't been short on technological inventiveness, you know, with a lot of things originating in Cosmos and then later being commercialized or monetized maybe a little bit better elsewhere. So I think, you know, like, but, you know, the best tech doesn't always win, but the best product usually does. And so I think, you know, this kind of comes back to like the ruthless focus on building great DeFi products. I think, you know, and coming back to your original question of like, do you integrate, you know, as like you're building Cosmos DeFi, do you integrate it with existing networks where like DeFi activity is happening on like Ethereum or Solana or something? Or do you kind of like focus on building your own DeFi ecosystem here at home? I think, you know, you have to separate sort of like the product from the distribution. So like from a distributional standpoint, it may make sense for you to just simply, you know, distribute, you know, your products or your services cross-chain to some of these other DeFi ecosystems and tap into the liquidity and users that are there. You know, I had the fortune or misfortune, however you want to kind of think about it, of like working at TFL for 2 years during its meteoric rise and collapse. And one of the things that we were doing there was like these liquidity deals, UST liquidity deals with different projects on different networks like Avalanche, Solana, Ethereum. And like that was really helpful in getting like distribution for UST, and it made a lot of sense for that product. But there are certain benefits that you get from that you can't get from these sort of, one of those is synchronous composability, which is this idea that you can have smart contracts sort of interact seamlessly with each other or atomically with each other within the same block, and that gives benefits to the user. So in the context of like one great example of this is like flash loans. I think flash loans is honestly like one of the coolest things that as an industry we've built thus far, because it's fundamentally like an innovation that doesn't exist in traditional finance, which is, flash loans, if you're not familiar with it, is this idea that you can basically, as a borrower, you can go borrow like an infinite amount more capital than like you'd be able to if you like manually went to the, the platform, like borrowed, up to like your liquidation threshold. You can then take that borrowed capital, use it to exploit an opportunity in the market, like an MEV opportunity or an arbitrage opportunity, and then return that borrowed capital to the lender and pocket the profit within the same block, right? And if any one of those kind of aspects of that transaction doesn't, fails, the whole thing reverts. Like that's amazing, right? Like in terms of improving capital efficiency and profitability for like both the lender and the borrower gets to borrow like infinitely more capital and use that to exploit an opportunity in the market and make more money as a result of that, while taking on like little risk because it just reverts the transaction if it's not successful. And the lender earns more fees from like lending out this capital in the form of flash loans, while also doing it with very little like liquidation or like insolvency risk because the transactions won't revert. So like synchronous composability is like a fundamental advantage that like DeFi has that TradFi just can't offer. And so I think you only get that when you have like a tightly integrated DeFi ecosystem on one chain. You don't get that from like porting your applications or your products and services over to other ecosystems. Like another example of this is like on Neutron, you have Mars and you have Drop, which are like, Mars is a credit protocol, Drop is a liquid staking protocol for interchain assets that's like backed by Lido. And like Mars is this product which is like high leverage staking vaults where you can boost your staking rewards by entering this vault. In the back end, it sort of like loops your assets and you earn higher staking rewards by holding more of the underlying asset. And there's sort of like two ways to enter that vault. You can either enter that vault by like using liquidity, by basically swapping the asset that you have for the more of the asset you need, like get greater exposure. Or you can, basically Mars can compose with Drop smart contracts on Neutron since they're built on the same network and mint the appropriate amount of like a D atom, let's say, to enter that vault. And so people could enter this vault in size and completely circumvent slippage and trading fees. And so like this is another advantage of like, for the user, getting to enter a DeFi rewards only because these two applications are co-located on the same network. So I think synchronous composability is another like thing that as an industry, like we can benefit from building more things around that.
Yeah. George, what's your take on like, do you think there's an advantage to like a integrated monolithic DeFi ecosystem, or what's your take on it?
So the current issue with DeFi right now is that you have basically forks of the same applications, but on different ecosystems. So you have lending, DEX, perps on Solana. The same thing, you have it on EVM, and then you have it on Cosmos, maybe even on multiple chains on Cosmos and multiple chains on EVM. And the issue with that is that you have a limited pool of users, and then everybody is basically fighting for the same users, right, as he said. So, and this causes what we call a zero-sum game, where everybody's fighting for the same liquidity and users, and it's just moving around. Right? And this is why we feel DeFi is not great anymore. Because back then, there was maybe Terra, Osmosis, Uniswap, and just Ethereum, and this is where DeFi was. Now it's all over 100 blockchains. Now you have Unichain. Now you have all these L2s that want their own ecosystem. Now Base wants to, like break out of Ethereum. And this is what is happening. And this is, I think, why we feel that DeFi isn't as it used to be, because the user experience has degraded so much the past few years due to the expansion of the modular thesis, which is basically that you have now all these L2s, all these app chains, which are basically just, I won't say fork, but like the same type of a DeFi application, but a bit different in terms of maybe faster, maybe better in some ways. But this is a huge issue because users now don't know where to go, and now they're looking where is the best incentive for me to go, and people and applications, DeFi apps, start paying money to be able to, get these users in through incentives, through inflation, through whatever that is. And this is, I think, a huge cause for DeFi experience to be degraded that much in the past few years. Because back then you knew where you needed to go. Now you don't know anymore. Where is the next? And people are just waiting for the next DeFi chain. Okay, now there's Base and there's Solana. Now where is it next? I don't think that's a good way to think. I think this could get even worse. And this is why I think having cross-chain interfaces, cross-chain backend solutions, unified solutions, aggregating liquidity is very important because you're actually allowing the entire ecosystem to grow at the same time instead of fighting basically for the same liquidity. And this is why Polaris, for example, is very important. This is why I believe what we're building on the back end is also very important, to build a shared infrastructure for liquidity to grow at the same time instead of basically everybody's fighting for the same liquidity, and it's getting smaller with time.
On the slight flip side of that, though, right? Like, so I agree that like Polaris, we're trying to say like, okay, liquidity, it's fine if it's not, fully integrated. Your question was about like integrated versus modular on how it affects DeFi, right? And I think modular is fine for spot stuff, right? Like that's what Polaris is trying to solve right now of like, hey, okay, you want to do spot trading across all of these places, we'll build an interface that aggregates all of them. On the other side of this, though, where aggregated is actually very important is when you bring any sort of leverage into the system. Because once you've introduced leverage of any kind, now you actually do need high levels of like integration, right? So like, even aggregators work very well in spot because it's like, it's a simple question of like, oh, okay, where are you getting the best price output? Because once the trade is done, the swap is over. It's like a one-time thing. When you're talking about leverage, it's not just about where you're getting the best execution. There's also, building an aggregator over like dYdX and Hyperliquid is like not a simple thing because it's, you have to also account for funding rates. You have to account for, they both have different like liquidation rules and all this stuff. They have different collateralization rules and all this. So it's like, I think when you start to get into leverage stuff, that's when you actually do need to start building like vertically integrated systems.
So is there any way to like break the fragmented liquidity also for like leverage staking or perp trading? Or do you think those ecosystems will basically emerge like on Cosmos, on Ethereum, on Solana, fragmented? Or
I mean, I think you're going to probably have like a few pillars of like perps markets, right? I think like dYdX and Hyperliquid are sort of like the two behemoths, and like and the thing with perps specifically is they are kind of very winner takes all style markets, and so I think you're going to have like a few major centers of perps liquidity, and then like not a very tail end of not that many other stuff.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think the topography of the perps market will diverge much from the spot market. If you look at spot, how like the top 10 players are getting most of the liquidity, the perps market should evolve in the same way on the DEX side also. So the liquidity will be within a few hubs, and yes, many people are working on this, including dYdX.
Yeah, awesome. So I want to get back to one topic. I think all of you mentioned a little bit. It's like incentives in the DeFi ecosystem, and I think it's a really interesting topic. Actually, like there's a lot of DeFi projects building right now. So there's a lot of infrastructure, but also like it feels pretty competitive for the liquidity actually. Like a lot of new projects launching with like very attractive incentive campaigns, and then they take over users, and it feels like there's also a kind of mercenary behavior in DeFi users. Yeah, maybe like a quick take from everyone, like what do you think about it? I feel like the incentives in crypto and DeFi are pretty fucked up actually, where like new founders come up with new protocols and then they launch some incentive campaign, launch a token, hype it up, and then that's it kind of. But then there's like long-term builders, people actually building like really solid infrastructure and so on, and they are kind of suffering from that. Can you, like, do you feel that? Or
Incentives are for kickstarting something. If you build your product for constant incentive, it means your product has a weakness and you should be revising something. When I go and trade on Coinbase or Binance, I got no incentive. The incentive is the UI, the liquidity, and in our business, the liquidity is like prime, right? So you work on the fundamentals of your product. You can use incentive, that's very, very fair. But if you keep looking for new incentive, or if you have to create inflations for incentive, it's eventually signal a weakness in your product or in a weakness in your offering. So incentive are for kickstart something, and at some point you need to iterate or just review and restart from a blank sheet if you have to your product. You cannot be constantly on incentive. It's not healthy.
But that's an issue if like other projects are launching new and they all bring like incentive campaigns.
Binance is still the #1 in the market, and they have no incentive for you. And whenever there is a small DeFi project or whatever other projects coming up with incentive, all the users of Binance are not migrating away, right? There is a subset of them going because they are agile and they are early adopters and more degen maybe. But like what will be moving the needle is eventually like the good fundamentals of your project, number of users, trading volume if you're in the DeFi business, as well as the fees being paid to by your users to the protocol. So eventually you are aiming at balancing your operations. Yeah.
Yeah, I think incentives aren't like a new concept that are like specific to crypto as well. Like, you know, Web2 companies have been using incentives to attract users and like solve the cold start problem, which is this like idea that you need to bootstrap the initial network effects for your business, and you can use incentives as a tool for that. You know, but it's not like, it's kind of like, you know, in crypto today as well with like liquidity, like big partners slapping liquidity into things, like $100 million into this protocol, $50 million here. Like that's not like solving the problem, right? Doesn't mean you found product market fit. It just means that you were great at negotiating a liquidity deal. So I think that, you know, incentives play an important role, and they can be an accelerant in like allowing you to find product market fit over time by like helping you solve that cold start problem. Like I said, you kind of it comes back to like crypto startup 101, where you have like 2 phases of the startup. You have pre-product market fit and post-product market fit. Pre-product market fit, your only mandate is like finding product market fit in a large market, and like the large market aspect of that is obviously important with being able to capitalize on a large enough economic opportunity. But ultimately, like, you know, you just need to build great products that are compelling enough that people want to use them without being paid to use them, right? Like Binance is a great example of that. You know, like there's other examples as well where you don't need to be paid to use something. And so like incentives are sort of like a tool. They can be an accelerant, but they're not like an end within itself.
Great distribution are the new incentives.
Yeah. Great words. Yeah, time is up as well. Maybe just like, if you can say, what's the one most important thing to make DeFi great again? In like just one word or one sentence for all of you.
We need privacy on chain. I have friends who are like market makers on centralized exchanges, and they're like, we can't deploy our best trading strategies on chain because as soon as we do that, we're leaking our trading strategies to the entire world that we spent a lot of money and time developing. And so they're using their like shitty trading market making strategies on chain which have no edge and stuff. So without on-chain privacy to protect this like protect people's trading strategies, we're not going to get the same level of volumes as you have on centralized exchanges.
Great point. Yeah.
I'll pick distribution to help making DeFi great again.
Yeah.
I believe you need to basically, there's 2 things. Number one, just to remove the need for bridges. Bridges is one of the worst, I think, attack vectors first in blockchain, and also it's a very bad user experience overall. And 2, you need to basically unify liquidity in a way where all the assets on all these chains and all these ecosystems can be basically put or represented in one place, and users can tap into this source of liquidity for all their needs, whether it's leverage, perps, prediction markets, whatever. I think these are the 2 most important points.
I think in short, just integration. You know, I think a few panelists talked about this, but having a really tightly integrated DeFi ecosystem has a lot of advantages. So I think that's the one thing I would say.
Amazing. Cool. Thanks so much. Looking forward and excited for what we're all building.
Thank you.